Hi, this is Jess. This week, we're talking about books that made us cry. Although we don't go into detail, this episode does contain some upsetting themes. I hope you enjoy the show. This is Voluminous, a listening books podcast for every kind of reader, but especially for fans of audiobooks. I'm Jessica Stone, and this is one of the episodes where some of the staff here at Listening Books have a good gab about something readerly, and then end the show, not with a whimper, but with a game. This week we're talking about books that have made us sniffle, sob, or downright weep. And I think we've got a good selection of fiction and non-fiction to share with you. Here to chat about them with me are Louise Barling. Hi, Louise.
Hello.
Tell us what you do here at Listening Books.
My job title is Library and PR Manager, and that really basically means that I spread the word about listening books, and for all those members we have, I try and make the service as best as it possibly can be.
And we've also got Jenny Ann Lewis. Jenny, what do you do here at Listening Books?
Hi. I am the bookkeeper here, so I just do the account stuff.
Yes, very importantly, Jenny is responsible for giving me my expenses. Now, I understand that we have varying levels of, shall we say, sensitivity in this room when it comes to crying. Lou, where are you on the scale?
I'm a big crier.
Big crier?
Yeah, I cry everything and anything. So that's pretty much all books, adverts, all TV, yeah, everything.
Yeah, I hear that. I feel you. I have a feeling Jenny's our stoic in the group. Jenny, what about you?
I don't really cry that much. Not at all. Not even like at sad movies. Yeah, they don't make me cry that much.
And I know it's not that you're hard-hearted.
No, I like to laugh, which you'll probably hear loads of that. Loads of laughing. But yeah, I just don't know why. They just don't get me as much. Like, I don't really shed tears at books or films or anything like that.
Yeah, so it was possibly a bit harder for you to choose books for this.
Yeah, I chose ones that moved me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That maybe made the eyes just a little bit shinier than usual.
I agree with that.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, I am much more like Lou in this respect. I'm a notoriously easy crier. I cry at the memory of crying, so it's going to be a real challenge to get through this episode without bawling. So fair warning. we'll see how I do. I think we've all brought a few titles and authors of books that have really moved us for whatever reason. And I thought we would start off with our non-fiction titles. And luck at the draw, I'm going to start with you, Lou.
Okay.
Can you give us a non-fiction title?
Yeah, of course. So when I knew I was doing this podcast, I mean, because everything makes me cry, I kind of tried to look over my bookshelves and think, which ones really made me cry, which were the ones that I remembered the most. And I re-picked up Primo Levi, If This Is a Man. And I read that book first when I was about 19, I think, and it's been a long time since I read it, but it really made an impression on me. It's harrowing if you haven't read it. So Primo is an Italian Jew, and he was sent to Auschwitz, and it's about his time in Auschwitz, and it's about the mundane times there as well. It's a document of his time, and it's an account. So he doesn't write particularly emotionally. It's quite objective, and it's quite, this is what happened and this is what happened, but it's harrowing, and it's heartbreaking, and also he talks a lot about, because if this is a man and what happens to humanity because of what's happening.
Do you think that mundanity that you just mentioned, and the sort of the lack of was it sentimentality?
Emotional,
or emotion. Do you think that is what contributed to making it so affecting for you?
Definitely, because it gives a real sense of what it was like to be there, and it was just continuous. You were always there, and nothing was happening. So we talk about needing to go and get the shoes, or having to share a bed with someone, or the hospital wing. And, you know, the fact that nothing is happening is a real contribution, contribute, to, you know, the time that was spent there.
Yeah.
But the way he writes as well, that kind of set back a little bit from being there and statistical. There was one bit that I noticed right at the beginning of the book. So they're just arriving into the camp, and I think it kind of gives you an idea of how he talks about a life. I mean, he writes beautifully, but it's almost statistical. Shall I read a little bit from it?
Yes, please do.
So he says, what happened to the others, to the women, to the children, to the old men, we could establish neither then nor later. The night swallowed them up purely and simply. Today, however, we know that in that rapid and summary choice, each one of us had been judged capable or not capable of working usefully for the Reich. We know that of our convoy, no more than 96 men and 29 women entered the respective camps, and that of all the others, more than 500 in number, not one was living 2 days later.
My goodness.
I mean, it is emotional, but he's telling you how it is. You know, in fiction books, you get so involved with the characters, don't you? And with this, it's just an account of something truly awful.
Yeah, it sounds as if like the removal of emotion from his telling of it makes more space for your own emotion.
Yeah, you feel kind of hollow after you've read it.
Yeah.
But I think it's something really important to read. It needs to be remembered, you know.
Yeah, I feel kind of ashamed to say I haven't read it yet. I know of it. It's not one that I've read yet. And I think part of it is because I know that it's hard hitting, and so I'm a little bit afraid of it.
It's quite inspiring though, the way he talks about humanity, I think, and what makes a person, and how much that can be taken out of you. So
yeah, I mean, the title itself is so resonant, isn't it? If this is a man, I mean, because what are the implications then?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. So on a scale of eyes getting a little shiny to shuddering sobs, how far along the scale were you?
Shuddering sobs, most definitely. and even just, I mean, and it's more than shuddering sobs, I think. I think it's the aftermath of how it leaves you as well. So you're not just, you know, sometimes when you watch a film and you weep throughout it, but with this book afterwards, you know, it's the big deep breaths and you're left feeling a little bit empty.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing, you weren't there, there's nothing you can do about it. But, you know, it's true, it's non-fiction, it's different to fiction somehow, I think. You know, this actually really happened to not just this one person in this book, but to hundreds of thousands of people as well.
Yeah. That's interesting now. There's nothing you can do about that. I wonder, does it prompt you to think about what you can do now to make sure things like that aren't happening?
So. I think that's why everybody should read a book like this, you know, to make sure that as humans and humanity, we keep our humanity.
Yeah, I would concur. Was there a specific moment that got to you?
No, I mean it's all awful.
Yeah.
But a specific part of it, no, I don't think so. You know,
yeah.
Because it's continuous. Of this happens and this happens and this is just life. I can't actually pick out one bit that.
I think what you read was a really good example, though.
Yeah, and that's right. That's right at the beginning as they're arriving.
Mm.
You know, and then it just talks about the life in the camp, and like I was saying before, you know, 2 people to a bed, and seeing people, then not seeing them, and the fight for the soup, and he talks about they will have their numbers tattooed on them, and you know how long they've been there from the number tattooed on you, and I think that because he was one of the later Jews that came to the camp, that people kind of knew that, so they take advantage of, you know, trying to steal his bowl and his, you know, and his spoon and things. So yeah, and him just not knowing what was happening most of the time.
Even just saying that, stealing the bowl and his spoon, like the sort of those small, as you say, mundane kind of details compared to the enormity of the cruelty that's going on a larger scale. somehow having that contrast in the smaller scale of those little details just seems to put it in sharper relief.
I think so, and because he does talk about those things that are happening between the inmates, if you will. You know, it's not just the SS soldiers that are, you know, may beat them or send them to the gas chambers, but, you know, the difficulty of life, the everyday life as well, like finding shoes that will fit you because you've got to go and march, and that's a killer, you know.
So that was Primo Levi's If This Is a Man. Excellent choice for the weepies, as I'm going to go.
Yeah, the weepies and the just
Got me, actually.
that kind of
That got you.
Yeah,
And that got our stoic.
I think talking about it, maybe it's just talking about it that really just hit home.
Well, what did you bring us in our non-fiction group?
Well, my one's very different. My one is The Uncommon Wisdom of Oprah Winfrey.
Oh.
So it's a book, basically, sort of a biography, but mainly quotes about things that she's faced and just a lot about her life. It's quite interesting. Stuff that I actually didn't know a lot before. So about her upbringing in Mississippi, her childhood, how it was quite bad.
Yeah.
She faced a lot of hardships. And yeah.
Is there something that most of us probably would know about Oprah that you learned?
Yeah, I mean, she had a child at 14 years old.
No.
Yeah. And
how did I not know this?
yeah, a lot of people, she tried to keep it hidden as much as possible. But yeah, she had a child at 14. Unfortunately, the child died. But yeah, it was a lot of things that you wouldn't necessarily know about her because she's so famous, and she's she's one of the richest women in America. But just the fact that she's had this hard life to where she is now, you wouldn't necessarily know about it. The abuse she suffered from her relatives, given away by her mum. You know, there was a lot of stuff that was going on in her young life, and she was a drug abuser as well. So a lot happened to her. It's just interesting that
you'd never think to look at her.
That. No, it's things that you would never know.
And I appreciate that you're not going to be terribly far along on this scale, but I'm going to offer the same scale to you as I did to Lou. The scale of shiny eyes to shuddering sobs. Where were you?
I would think shiny eyes. I think at the time when I actually received the book, so my mum gave it to me and I was about 16, 17. And I didn't really think much of it because I thought, Oprah. But yeah, it got me. And I think I realised why my mum gave it to me, because it's sort of reality of things that people suffer in life. And
was that what moved you? Was it the suffering? Was it the sadness?
Yeah, actually, it was the sadness. But then also how she had not overcome, because I don't think you can overcome things like that, like abuse that people have suffered. I think it's just that she was determined, that determination to become successful. Is that I don't know if that's right, but yeah, she's a very determined lady.
It sounds like she didn't let those things define her. Yes, because not even apart from the childhood aspect of things, even when she became famous, even just thinking about her fame, people, now weren't, before when people didn't even know about her when she was younger, to then when she started becoming famous, all of a sudden all this attention is put on you. And it's a bit of a shock. It's a massive shock. So it's how she dealt with those things as well. And I think that's also really interesting. Was she a personal inspiration before you read about her?
Not really. No. I never really bothered with watching her talk shows or anything when I was younger.
And your mother gave you the book?
My mum gave me the book.
Did she tell you why? Did she find it personally inspiring?
I think she did.
Okay.
Yeah. But she just said, you should read this. And that was it. She didn't give much details. And I was like, okay. Fine. And then I started getting into it, really getting into it. And then after that, I wanted to get to know more about her.
Yeah. I think it's really lovely that you actually took your mother's recommendation to read that book. I think sometimes I'm a little bit resistant to reading books that are strongly recommended to me by somebody else, just because there's a lot of pressure there to like it. But I think especially in terms of parent-child relationships, often, the child wants to kind of differentiate themselves, and so actually doesn't want to read the things that their parents loved because they want to find their own things to love. So I actually think that's really lovely that you did take your mother's recommendation and got so much from it.
Yeah, it was. I'm very thankful that she did recommend it, actually, because I would recommend that to someone else. This book to someone else. So,
who would you recommend it to?
Well, family members.
Yeah.
Or anyone really. I think mainly. Well, a lot of women. I think not that you shouldn't recommend it to men as well. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just, I think for young people who maybe they just go through life like it's nothing. We just go through things. But actually to get to know things that people have faced before, real life things that people have faced before, I think, yes, important.
Well, I also brought a title for the nonfiction round, and like the two of you, I chose one that does deal with some sort of hard topics. It's a pretty recent book, though. It came out this year, and it's called Notes to Self by Emily Pine. And I read it late this summer, I think. And it's a collection of personal essays on addiction, fertility, feminism, sexual violence, depression, some really hard hitting stuff. And, if you were just to tell me that that's what it was about, I might think, oh, this just sounds like misery lit and avoid it. But it isn't. I wouldn't say there's misery in it. There's suffering in it. But what stands out to me and what moved me so much was the love that's in this book. I mean, she's talking about personal accounts. These are things that have happened to her. It's deeply personal. It's deeply honest. And the way that the strength of love comes through, how much it can take, how much love can suffer and still have so much to give, can still bear that weight and give back.
That's the kind of thing that makes me cry, I
Exactly.
think, more than anything else, that kind of emotional connection, isn't it?
Yes.
To trying to get through. I think trying to, the hopefulness and the courage and trying to overcome whatever it is.
Yes, absolutely. I was really grateful. Actually, there's you know how books will have quotes from authors on the cover to help sell the book to you, and one of them that I have heard from others that seems like a bit of a dubious recommendation, but I appreciated the warning. It was from Anne Enright, the Man Booker Prize winning author of The Gathering, and her recommendation was not to read this book in public because it will make you cry. And I can appreciate how somebody might read that and think, I'm not sure that's the best selling way to describe something, but I actually really appreciated it because being an easy crier myself, I made sure to read it in a place where I wouldn't sort of feel vulnerable to public scrutiny.
Yeah.
And I did have on the scale, I had to put the book down and just have a good cry for a little while. Like I had to stop reading to cry. It's like,
Yeah.
to
let it all out.
Exactly. Like I can't be distracted from the crying right now. I just need
to get this done and then get back to the book.
Yes, and cry some more.
Yeah.
I mean, the very first essay is about her traveling to Corfu to look after her father, whose liver is failing because of his alcoholism. And the hospital in Corfu at the time was just incredibly underfunded and understaffed. And so she and her sister were having to do the physical work of caring for him. And the way that she describes this, kind of like you were saying with the Primo Levi book, there's this remove where you are just hearing the cold facts of what this involves, of cleaning up someone's excrement. And, just very, very hard-hitting. I think that precision in the way that she's telling it, and then the way she explores the dynamics of this love that she has for her father, whom she absolutely has adored all her life. And yet the frustration and anger that he continues to do something that is causing them all so much suffering. And she has a line in the book that I think really resonates with a lot of people who have loved people with addiction problems. It says, the person who loves the addict exhausts and renews their love on a daily basis. And I think that's such an encapsulating statement about what it is to love an addict. I mean, we're learning so much more about how to love an addict now. I think there's been a lot of research on how to preserve your sanity, but also continue to love them in the most compassionate and helpful way. But, you know, from that very first essay, I was a puddle.
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to afford to go into detail about looking after someone you really care about. That's really hard, just to put those in words.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
I'm feeling it.
I'm glad it's affecting you too.
It's hard to describe like how the feeling is sometimes. I guess that's it's interesting at books that make you emotional and make you cry. You need to get that emotion out. Can't hold it in, to say.
Yeah.
I think whenever it's family members as well.
Yeah.
Whenever, even if you can't necessarily relate to a particular illness or affliction, you can understand as a person what it must be like for the feeling to lose her father or to be losing her father. And I'm terrible when I read books like that, because and I think that's why I'm such a sobber, is I always put myself in everybody's situation and it happened, it must be awful. And
I want to pick up on what you just said there about whether or not you've experienced this particular thing, because there was another part in the book that really got to me, and it's when she's talking about having suffered miscarriage and then infertility. And what got to me was the way that she described the relationship with her partner, and obviously the grief that they went through as they realized that what they had hoped would be in their future was not going to be. But I was thinking about it and thinking, like, I think anybody can identify with that, whether or not they've suffered from miscarriage or infertility, because you can imagine, I think it's got to be nearly a universal experience, that at some point you realize that the expectations you had for your life will not be realized in the way that you had imagined. Yeah. And what I really appreciated about this book, what really moved me, was the way that she and her partner realized that if they focused too much on the loss, then they would miss the goodness and the sweetness that was right there in front of them. That was the love that they had between them. And it's so beautiful to read how they came to terms with what their life was going to be together. And
so it united them.
Well, I think they were already united, but I mean, I think it must draw you closer to go through that together, but also to rebuild, to build a new vision together, to imagine new outcomes and new futures. I just thought it was, there's a moment of sweetness and joy when she realizes what she has right in front of her. And I just, that actually affected me more than the grief of the miscarriage and infertility, Yeah.
Yeah, the joining together. Yeah, I find friendship and kind of happy times in books and things that affects me as well. Just as much.
Yeah.
Because, it's the outcome of what they've come through together. And
yeah, it's not just the sadness.
Yes.
They always say that love bears all things.
Yeah.
And it really, I think, with books like this, it does show. It can bear through a lot of different circumstances and different paths. But it's there. It's unbreakable. So,
yeah.
And it can be friends as well. I picked up a children's book. I was just in a bookshop, just flicking through books, and picked up a children's book, which I ended up buying. I read it all in the bookshop, and that was about friendship. It was about it was a true story about Ella Fitzgerald and Marilyn Monroe, and Marilyn helping Ella get a show, or kind of helping her with a career, and that made me cry in the bookshop. It was really sweet and simple that they did it together, two women together, and they helped each other out. And then Ella helped Marilyn with her singing, and Marilyn went on to sing for the president, and it was just a really kind of nice ending about what you can do together if with a friend or something. And then I read it. I bought it and I read it to my daughter, and I was choking up reading it to her as well.
But yeah, that was Notes to Self by Emily Pine, and yes, the tenacity of love, the strength of it, that's what really came through, what really moved me. And I know I forgot to ask you, Jenny, to repeat the name of the Oprah Winfrey. Was it an autobiography? Or
Yes,
okay.
It's a book of quotes. So but it's called The Uncommon Wisdom of Oprah Winfrey.
Fantastic. Let's move on to some fiction. Mm-hmm. And then we'll lighten things up, I think, for the end of the show. We'll have a little game, introduce a bit of levity. But before we do that, let's do a round of fiction. And because I started with Lou last time, I'll start with Jenny this time.
Okay.
Hit us.
Okay, so it's not a light one, I'm afraid, but it's called Push by Sapphire. And this one is a hard-hitting fiction book. And it's about this character, lady called Precious Jones, 16-year-old, who faced a lot of abuse from her father. She's got 2 kids by her father, so it's pretty tough. And her mother was verbally abusive as well. And she couldn't read or write either, so she's illiterate as well. And she's obese as well, so she's got a lot of issues. And it's just about her learning to, the book's mainly, apart from all the abuse side, it's about her learning to read and write and to find her voice. And she has a really supportive teacher. And her teacher, there's a few girls in the class who are also illiterate. They learn to read and write, and they're able to write their life in a book for themselves.
If this plot sounds familiar to you, but you haven't read the book, then you may have seen the film.
Yes,
called Precious, which is based on the book. Yeah. And was there? I mean, there's so much. There's so much to cry about in this book, really. Was there a specific moment that really got to you?
That made me cry? I'm
adjusting the question a little bit for you. Just because
it didn't make me cry. But I think I remember when I was reading even the first couple chapters, and it goes straight in about what's happened to her. Straight in, like it's not that it's graphic, it's a lot to take in the first couple of chapters of a book. You don't expect to hear about, she's just about to have her second child by her father. You just don't expect that. So that hit me.
And nor should we expect that.
No. Yeah, it's just that got me. That really hit me. And also near the end of the book, you find out that she's trying to build her life, and then her mum tells her that her father has just died of AIDS, and I'm probably doing my spoilers here, aren't I? Sorry, that's not all the main point of the book, but
right?
That she finds out that her father died of AIDS, and she goes for a test and finds out she's HIV positive. So.
This is just building on the tragedy, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's reminding me of Hanya Yanagihara's A Little Life, in that you do wonder at some point how much more can someone take. Like, that there's that it seems beyond any limits, and yet it isn't actually. This,
people do go on, don't they?
Yeah. Well, and she did. She goes on, and the book leaves it kind of open. Which is, I thought,
on a positive note.
On a positive note.
Yeah.
On a positive note. So it was nice to see that there was some, although again hard things to even talk about. There were a lot of positives in the book. Again, with her teacher helping these girls just to read and write, things that we take for granted, actually. But actually, for them just to carry on and to write about their experiences.
Yeah.
And to help their children as well, and that's what she was determined to do. So,
which again is quite affecting, because you could imagine a different scenario, some different feelings about your children if they were the product of rape and incest, and the fact that that she loved them and wanted the best for them as well as a moving part of the story, I think.
Yeah, they're her children and she loved them.
Yeah.
So
Oof.
yeah, it's a hard one.
Yeah.
It's a hard one.
Interestingly, I find it very interesting that you seem to be possibly more moved talking and hearing about these books than you are when you're actually reading them, or you seem closest to your emotional.
Again, I think it was a period of time where in life where again I read this book again. I was probably 17, and just that's an age where you're sort of learning about yourself and learning about the world and just learning about life and different experiences and life and what people have gone through and
what people are capable of.
Yeah, and it's
both good and
not
bad.
to depress ourselves or anything, but unfortunately the world isn't an amazing place. There are things that happen, and unfortunately these happen to young women. Like again, even though this book is fictional, the author had also faced issues in her personal life, so that's why she was able to write this book. But yeah, it makes you more aware, maybe. And unfortunately, we do need to be aware of things like this that happen. But again, even though this is a fictional character, it shows that, again, they were determined not to let this be like the determining factor of their life. They pushed forward. And even if we may think it's simple, something to read and write, but that is a big thing for a lot of people who haven't grown up in the area or so on, that it's, education is pushed forward. They wanted that for themselves, and I think that's really, really important.
Absolutely. So that was Push by Sapphire. Lou, what fiction title did you bring us?
I listened to Thousand Splendid Suns.
Listened to?
I listened to it, yes. I the first time I read it, and this time I listened to it by Khalid Hosseini.
That's right,
Saying
yeah.
that right.
Did you have the same emotional reaction both times?
I think, if I'm honest, I cried more when I read it. And I've been trying to analyse why that was, because the narrator's really good. The book is still moving, and the audiobook still made me cry. But I think it was possibly because when I read a book, and I often sit on my bed and read a book, I'm not doing anything else. I'm reading the book and I'm totally immersed in it, and there's nobody else around as well. And when I was listening to the audiobook, I was listening to it walking to work and walking home again.
Where your attention is slightly divided.
Slightly divided.
Yeah.
And also there's people around as well. So when you feel yourself going and there's people there, you can stop yourself a little bit more.
That must be nice.
Or being able to stop yourself crying. Yeah. So I definitely, it still made me sob. But I think I was in pieces more when I read it.
Do you think that could possibly have been, though, because it was also your first encounter with it?
Yes, possibly. Yeah, and although I couldn't remember the story this time around, I remembered the very basics of the story. And it's about all I can remember was that it was set in Afghanistan, and it was about I thought it was about a woman and her life in Afghanistan. It's not actually. It's about two women. But yeah,
refresh our memories, because I know it's been a while since I've read it as well, so I could do with a refresher.
It's set in Afghanistan, and it's about two women and their lives. So it starts off their separate lives, and then they kind of come together in the story, and it's about what happens to her. I don't know how much to give away, because I liked the fact that I didn't know much about this book, but I'm also going to have to give a little bit away, I think, to tell you why it was so upsetting.
Give as little as possible away, I think.
Yeah.
But whatever is necessary.
So the first woman, Mariam, she lives with her mother and her father. She adores her father, but he lives elsewhere with his family. So she was conceived out of wedlock, and her father has already had 3 wives. So and she adores him, but it ends up that Mariam's mother commits suicide. I think I can tell you that because it's right at the start of the book.
Yeah.
And then her father his 3 wives arrange a marriage for Mariam, and then that's kind of the start of her story, really, then,
Right.
when she moves to Kabul with Rashim, her husband. And that's kind of her life, and they're trying, at the beginning he's not a bad man. He wants children, and she has many miscarriages, and then things change and they get different between them and him. And then, so that's kind of the first part of the book. And then the second part of the book starts with another girl and her life. And it kind of talks about her life with her mother and father and, her friends. And then there's a bombing that kills her parents. Again, I think this is still quite early on in the book. And then her and Mariam, I kind of don't want to say too much more now about what actually happens, but her name's Lila, and Mariam, it's about their courage and their friendship and the time in Afghanistan and kind of the adversity and everything they go through together.
Yeah.
There's a lot of you were saying with your book that there's just more and more tragedy happening. It's the same in this. You think things can't get any worse, and then they do, but then that's broken with kind of bouts of hopefulness where they try and get away, and you think, oh, is this going to happen? And then it doesn't, and life gets worse, and yeah, it's pretty heartbreaking.
I think one of the things that I remember about that book, because I read it feels like a long time ago now.
Yeah, I can't remember when it came out, but I read it again when it came out.
I feel like it was a decade ago or
yeah,
so.
And more maybe.
But I do remember it being kind of revelatory how much more freedom comparatively women in Afghanistan experienced under the Russian rule. This
is it, and kind of each time there's a new kind of ruler, someone takes over, you think this is it, and I think they experience that life is going to get better, and it gets worse every time. When they defeat the Russians, and then it's kind of been the Afghanistani fighters that, take over. And then after that is the Taliban, and then, and then it's kind of constant defeat. And and there's this hopefulness in it that is dashed every time.
Good choice.
Yeah, it was, it's strange to say when you enjoy a book.
Yeah.
But I think as well, what I found quite upsetting is because the women, they had no rights, and it was difficult, and they couldn't go out on their own when it was when the Taliban were ruling. It was when they were trying to get to an orphanage, and it was really difficult to get there. I think that when they say the date, I was always surprised because you think they're talking about things that happened in like 1996 and 1998, and I know it's a fictional book, but all these things were happening, and it's in my lifetime.
Yeah.
When I was a teenager and, going to festivals and we
were completely oblivious.
Completely oblivious to what was happening to, this was a fictional book, but to real women in a different country that were, Lila is 15, when her parents die, and it's just... Yeah. Yeah, it was a good book. I mean, it was a great book. But it's very, very sad, and it's very emotional.
Yeah.
But
I just felt like I learned so much about Afghan history and and the different sort of dynamics at play in the politics of even the moment now. I mean, it was a good education for me. I realize a lot of people are more knowledgeable about history and geography than I am, but I actually found it really revelatory in that way.
Yeah, definitely. Exactly the same for me, I think. And reading about, because war is happening, but that's not what the book's about. And then there's certain kind of scenes from it that remind you that war's going on. Like they have to go to the hospital at one point, and there's no anaesthetic, and and the doctor says that there's going to be none, and you can go to this pharmacy and that pharmacy, and you may have to barter. So they're kind of reminders that the war is happening, but the core of the story is more about these two women and what they're going through in their own home, and just their friendship and their courage.
So that was 1,000 Splendid Suns by Khalid Hosseini. Okay, so the book that I wanted to talk about in the fiction category, it's been a few years since I read it, and because I'm such an easy crier, obviously I could have picked any number of books that made me cry. Half the books worth reading are going to make me cry, at least. But I chose this one because I distinctly remember my husband passing me by while I was reading, and he said, "Are you crying again?" Well, what can I say? Yes, I was crying again. It's Lila by Marilyn Robinson. And I can't really talk about Lila without first mentioning Gilead, which was the first book that she wrote set in this fictional town of Gilead, Iowa. And it was a huge literary success. I mean, it was a Pulitzer Prize winner. It's probably, but before I read Gilead, I couldn't have answered the question, what's your favorite book? Like a lot of readers, it's like, that's like asking my favorite child. But now I have a favorite child, and it's Gilead.
And that's the biggest recommendation you can get for a book, isn't it? And now I just want to pick it up. That's your favourite book.
Well, but right next to it, I would put Lila. They're very much companion books, and the two main characters. So Gilead is about the Reverend John Ames, and it's written in his voice, and this book will also make people who cry. I keep shooting Jenny.
Yeah,
looks.
I know. It's crying
You will
out.
cry.
You will cry. It will happen.
This is, Gilead is the Reverend John Ames writing a letter to his son about his life, because he knows that he's not going to see his son grow up, because he's been diagnosed with an illness that is going to get him before his son grows up. And that already has my lip trembling, So, but it's the most beautiful, grave, wise, tender book. And she writes unapologetically from a tradition of religious conviction. She's I think she's a Congregationalist. Her fiction is so fused with what she gets from her religious tradition in such an unpreachy way that I recently heard her interviewed by an atheist, and he was just as gushing over her work as I am, and talked about how it enlarged it was an enlargement for him, that it made space for bigger thoughts. And anyway, so if Gilead, and I say if Gilead is about John Ames, and it is, Lila is about his wife, and he married a very unlikely young woman. The Reverend John Ames is a bit elderly. He marries and has a child fairly late in life, and he marries a woman who steps into the church during one of his services just to get shelter from a rainstorm. And that is where they see each other, and this romance, this very unlikely romance, begins, because Lila had a very different life to his, where his was rooted in this particular community of Gilead, Iowa, and rooted in his religious tradition, and rooted in all the philosophy and theology that he has studied over his life. She is a drifter who has experienced neglect and violence as a child, and then a life of vagrancy really as an adult, and has never belonged to one settled community, and has never been sheltered within respectability or and certainly within any kind of religious protection. And the thing about their relationship, it reminds me of if you've ever had to earn the trust of an animal, and you've had to work hard to win their love and trust, and the bond that results once you've earned that. I'm not saying that she was like his pet or anything. I'm not saying that. Far from it. But just because she had lived a life that did not give her any reason to trust people readily. There's this just a very fragile kind of bond between them that strengthens over time. And she's such a necessary counterbalance to him, because whereas he brings all of his intellect and his he has a wisdom from studying, theology and from his rootedness in community, and she brings the wisdom of a lived experience of suffering and also of a felt sense of injustice, of the damnation heaped upon her by religious people and so-called respectable people. And she senses that injustice, and so she has a compassion for people and reminds the Reverend John Ames to extend his compassion to people beyond where he had set the limits before, in a sense. And so anyway, just the relationship itself is so beautiful, is so moving. You also know in both novels that he's going to die before the end of it, and so that contributes. Yeah. That definitely contributes.
Is it the same timeline? Both novels are on the same timeline?
There's definitely a huge overlap. They don't start and end in the same place, but there's definitely overlap. And so it's not just the sadness that he's going to die. It's the sense of revelation that's in the book. You always feel, or I always feel, after reading a novel by Marilyn Robinson, that the world is just that much more saturated with goodness, with wonder. It's actually just such a transcendent experience. It's as if there's a sort of lifting of a veil or something, that somehow you can just see more clearly how beautiful, how wonderful the world is, and the potential in each human that you meet. When I was listening to Marilyn Robinson recently, because I heard her at the London Literature Festival talking, and she was saying that because of her conviction that every human being is an image of God, to her that means that every individual that she meets is a question being asked of her, is an obligation, is someone to honor. It's a very, this comes through in the way that she treats her characters, the sort of the sacredness of their lives.
Very respectful, I guess, in a way.
Certainly
right?
Certainly very respectful. Yeah. Yes, but of different kinds of lives, not just the lives that we would happily deem respectable, but of lives that are much wilder. Yeah. And
have a different past or background, or
she recognizes different sorts of wisdom, I think, and that really comes through. But yeah, I just I find her books extraordinary, and Lila I would put right up there with Gilead.
Is it uplifting tears then?
Yes, it's uplifting tears. It's I think the tears come from a sense of being overwhelmed by the enormity of what is in the smallest, most ordinary thing. You know, there are different kinds of reading. You can read to distract.
Yeah.
I do a little bit of that. I want to escape from whatever is on my mind in my real life and dive into something that's just going to be some entertainment, that's going to distract me from the others. And then there's reading that's actually the opposite of that. It's not about distracting, it's about revealing, and it's about intensifying. And okay, I think it's high time we brought in something a bit lighter. Yeah. So, are you ready to play a game? This time, I'm going to be asking you questions related to scenes of crying in books. So this is not scenes that make you cry. They're just scenes or passages about crying within famous books.
Okay.
Let's
give it a
go. All right. Because we don't have buzzers. Jenny, if you know the answer, I'm going to ask you to chime in with a wah.
Wow.
And Lou, when you know the answer, I want you to chime in with boo-hoo.
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 Okay. I mean, I could have made you blow your nose. So I think you should count yourselves lucky. Let's start with an easy one. Who said this? I wasn't crying about mothers, he said rather indignantly. I was crying because I can't get my shadow to stick on. Besides, I wasn't crying. And I would take either the character's name or the title, which happened to be the same thing, or the author, and who couldn't get their shadow to stick on.
Oh, I know this. And
It's a children's book.
I know.
Yeah, I was
I
thinking
know.
children's.
There was also a Disney film made.
Oh, I know. Boo-hoo.
No, I've probably got this wrong.
I think Jenny was in
This is
first.
probably really wrong now.
Okay.
Casper.
Peter Pan.
Peter
Pan.
Casper. Oh, that's terrible.
Okay. That was that. Lou got that point. Peter Pan. That was by J.M. Barrie. All right. Now, slightly more difficult.
Oh no, we're not going to do very well
I'm
with
never
that.
going to get this one.
However, I have narrowed down the choices for you. So, which Bronte sister wrote these lines? I was prepared for the hot rain of tears, only I wanted them to be shed on my breast. Now a senseless floor has received them, or your drenched handkerchief. But I err. You have not wept at all. I see a white cheek and faded eye, but no trace of tears. I suppose then that your heart has been weeping blood? Okay, so I don't expect you to recognise that right off. Was it Charlotte Bronte with Jane Eyre? Was it Emily Bronte with Wuthering Heights? Or was it Anne Bronte with The Tenant of Wildfell Hall?
Boo-hoo.
Oh.
I'm going to go Wuthering Heights.
You're going with Wuthering Heights?
I think,
Yeah, I would have guessed that.
It's not though. By your face, I'm saying it's not.
It's not. No, it's not that one. Jenny?
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
The first one, Charlotte Bronte.
Yeah.
Was it Jane Eyre?
Jane
It
Eyre.
was Jane Eyre. It was actually Mr. Rochester who said that. Yeah. Okay. Which famous Victorian author had this to say about crying? Heaven knows we need never be ashamed of our tears, for they are rain upon the blinding dust of earth, overlying our hard hearts. I was better after I had cried than before. More sorry, more aware of my own ingratitude, more gentle. Looking for a Victorian author, English.
Boo-hoo.
Yeah.
As a guess. I mean, I've no idea. I don't recognise the quote.
Uh-huh.
Charles Dickens?
Yep.
Oh.
Bingo. All right, we're 2-1 in your favour, Lou. So that was Pip from Great Expectations who said that. And, later in this podcast series, we'll be talking about Mark Evans of Bleak Expectations. So look forward to that. This quote is from Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall. And what I want you to do is fill in the blanks, okay? Both blanks are the same word, and I think you'll be able to get it from context, all right? Blank say, I can't endure it when women cry, just as people say, I can't endure this wet weather, as if it were nothing to do with the blank at all, the crying, just one of those things that happen. Who would say that about women crying? Who might cause women to cry and then complain? Yeah, okay.
Men?
Men! Yes.
I'm trying to think of a character in the
I
book.
was thinking of a character and I thought, but then it says blank says, so I'm thinking men, yeah.
Oh, very good. I think we're tied.
Oh.
All right, tiebreaker. You might be more likely to get this if you've seen the film rather than read the book, but we'll see. Eleanor could sit no longer. She almost ran out of the room, and as soon as the door was closed, burst into tears of joy, which at first she thought would never cease. That's how the book describes it. Nothing particularly remarkable about that quote. But when Emma Thompson portrays it in the film adaptation, it becomes an unforgettable scene. Which Jane Austen novel are we talking about here? This is when Mr. Ferrars finally proposes to Miss Dashwood.
Wow.
Yeah?
Oh no, I think this is wrong. Emma? No.
It's not Emma, but I know. But I often get confused just because Emma Thompson plays the main character. It's not Emma, and it's also not Pride and Prejudice. But
I kind of knew what it wasn't, but
yes.
Oh dear.
Let me think if I have any other hints to give you.
Big clues.
It is the title is in a similar format to Pride and Prejudice. It's something and something.
sensibility.
Got it.
I like looking at my bookshelves with closed eyes. Which one was it?
Well done. Okay, so Lou won the weepies this time around.
Well done.
Well done.
I don't feel that I can take that really. Then we had a lot of clues.
Well done. Well, that's all from us, but we want to hear from you. Specifically, we want to hear about the best book you've read lately, whether or not it made you cry. Tell us what you loved about it. It can be any kind of book, any genre, any format. Find us on Facebook. It's at ListeningBooks12 or Twitter at ListeningBooks. If you like this podcast, you can help others find it by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. Voluminous is produced by Listening Books, a UK charity providing audiobooks for people who have difficulty reading print, whether that's because of illness, disability, learning, or mental health. If that's you or someone you know, you can find out how to access our more than 7,500 titles, including many of the ones we talked about today, by heading to listening-books.org.uk.